Hello, 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 hello. We're talking to one of the next congressmen from California, with any luck, Brian Forde. My name is John Schieber. I'm a editor with TechCrunch. Occasionally, I write smart things. Mostly, I listen to people tell me smart things, like Brian is about to do today. Thank you so much, Brian, for appearing with me. And thank y'all across campus and y'all's host of the event for letting me chit-chat with Brian today. We have a lot of important things to talk about. How many of y'all know who Brian Forde is? Do I need to introduce? Brian, you have fans. Buddy. How many of y'all know who I am? No, I don't really care. It doesn't matter. I'm no one. I'm nothing. Can anyone hear me? Raise your hands if you can hear me. Raise your hands if you want to hear me. Oh, hey! Raise your hands if you want to hear Brian, who has more important things to say than, oh, look at that, echoing. Hello. Brian, can you say hey to everyone so we know that your mic is...
Hey, is this working? Yep, it is. All right, there we go.
Oh, that thing's on. Check one, sibilance. Check one, sibilance. So, Brian, I have an important question for you to start this off. You were in the hallowed halls of academia, the ivory tower of academia, where one does not need to worry about one's career, where everything is handed to you on a silver platter of, well, actually more like a plasticine tray of like Cheerios and whatever else you get in the dining halls. I don't know, I never went to MIT. But you've left that sacred hallowed hall to move into the like knife-stabbing, backstabbing world of politics. Why the hell would you do that? Why, Brian, why? Tell me.
Well, because someone has to defend all of our rights here, especially for the technologists. And so if you think about it, I happen to be from Orange County. Orange County is one of the 20 most flippable seats in the country. And I'm not someone who believes in the values or the policies that Donald Trump is espousing. And so there's an opportunity to flip that seat blue, not even out of partisanship, but quite frankly, just to be able to protect our democracy, something that he doesn't respect. But number two, which I think is more relevant to a lot of people in this room, is that if you think about the impact on our economy, on our society, on our jobs, on our digital and our civil rights over the next 10 years, they'll be much more impacted by technology, by the technology that you guys are working on, than anything Trump does over the next 2 to 4 years. And quite frankly, we don't have enough people in Congress who are thinking about this. Nearly 40% of people in Congress are lawyers. I don't have anything against lawyers, but we have enough of them in Congress. Nearly 4% are technologists. We don't have enough people with technical backgrounds in Congress thinking through all of the important issues that we're going to face as a society over the next 10 years.
So what point, this is a Bitcoin audience, a blockchain audience, excuse me, I don't want to get religious about which cryptocurrency y'all are engaged in right now, but this is a crypto audience. What about your platform, it will be designed to appeal to this audience? How are you thinking that crypto will play a role in governments, in securities? There's a lot to unpack there, but let's talk about how you feel about crypto in government, and then we can dig in a little deeper.
Sure. There's a lot of things that we can do with crypto in government. One of the things that government does is it helps notarize and create and have official ledgers. And one of the things that a Bitcoin ledger can do is notarize those documents. And so I think a lot about this child who was born in Hawaii back a few decades ago, and there was a lot of controversy about someone's birth certificate.
Have you seen it? Have you seen his birth certificate? Have you seen Obama's birth certificate?
Hey, we published it online. And there's a lot of controversy about it. And one of the things that made it more authentic was actually not him producing the birth certificate, but that at that same time, there was an advertisement in the local newspaper that certified that he was born. And so we use newspapers oftentimes to notarize documents. And in that case, it was really helpful in proving that President Obama was born in America. And so I also think there's other things that we can think about, from ledgers for property title to voting, to thinking through identity. You think a lot about our identity. Our legal identity is an analog document. We don't really have a digital form of legal identity. And so is there a way for us to think through creating digital identities that a state or federal government can issue? These are all important issues that we need to think through to make our government more efficient and effective for us, things that both Republicans and Democrats can get behind.
So should you be elected, you'll be instrumental in either validating or negating the wealth of all of these people who are milling around in the background right now, who aren't listening to what you're saying, but who you could ostensibly screw over in a major way. Or not, just saying. Maybe they'd want to listen, just saying. But when you think about the ways in which blockchain should be regulated, or where these ICOs or cryptos should be regulated, do you see a problem with the structure as it exists now? And do you have an idea of how to change it? Or what's you've been dealing with this stuff for years now. Like, how should these things be thought about by regulators or by the government?
I think there's obviously a lot of challenges with regulating cryptocurrencies today, whether it's an ICO or whether it's how much Bitcoin you hold and how they'll charge you on taxes. And I think one of the challenges that people have is that government officials don't really understand how a decentralized ledger works or why we should trust it. But you know, what we're starting to see right now is a set of legislation that's being produced by the blanking on the name, the UCL. What does the UCL stand for again? The Uniform Commission.
Audience? UCL?
No one's paying it. Universal Commission of Law. Uniform Commission of Law.
Thanks, buddy.
And what they're doing is they're producing something that they've worked closely with the cryptocurrency community to do, so that that one set can be adopted by all 50 states. And what's incredibly important about that, and what we're finding with most emerging technology companies, is that they're having to battle different regulations in different cities and states across the country. So they're having to fight 300 to 500 battles just to grow their company across the country. And the more uniform we can get that, while also respecting states and city rights, is going to be incredibly helpful for companies like yours to be able to expand quickly. What we saw in New York with the New York Bitcoin license was that a lot of Bitcoin companies left because it wasn't helpful to them. What the original intention of that is that others would adopt it, but the way it was ultimately structured wasn't helpful and created a lot more bureaucratic processes for a lot of these companies, and so they ended up just leaving. And we're going to be in a regulatory fight with other countries and cities around the world, and we're already seeing that they're creating regulatory sandboxes in the UAE for cryptocurrency companies. We're seeing Zug, Switzerland, step up and create a regulatory body just for cryptocurrencies.
Singapore has been very active, right?
Singapore, and so this isn't just a domestic fight. This is a fight for where are we going to have the most amount of cryptocurrency innovation happen around the world? And I want it to happen here in America. And to do that, we have to have clear regulation that it protects consumers, but also ensures that it's not so heavy-handed as that companies just leave and go to other countries. And we see this with other emerging technologies as well. We saw this with Uber, for example, and their self-driving cars. And so the California DMV told Uber that they did not have the proper license, and they didn't apply for it apparently, for having the autonomous vehicles in the state of California. And so when they told them to stop, the governor of Arizona the very next day said, if you're not welcome in California, you're welcome in Arizona. And so I think the 21st century tax credit has nothing to do with taxes. It actually has to do with regulation and creating an environment that allows for tech innovators like you to be able to grow your companies in that city, that state, or that country.
Well, that's an interesting point, and something I've been thinking about a lot recently, which is the the privileging of a technology ecosystem and the role that technology will play in the American economy going forward. And the fact that there's a lot of, frankly, underfunding that's happening right now, a lot of understaffing in terms of what the federal government has been able to provide from an oversight perspective, but also simply from like granting of SBIRs, getting government money into the hands of tech companies.
Yep.
All of that has been slowed down under the current administration in a way that I think jeopardizes America's ability to be a leader in this stuff. And I think, to your point, there has to be clear leadership from people who actually understand technology to get into government, to actually make the necessary legislation happen, to make government work in a way that benefits a technologically forward economy, rather than like a 21st, 22nd century economy, rather than a 19th century economy in a 21st century world. Now, when you think about what role or what levers you can pull or what role you can play in that, how do you see yourself as an advocate for that going forward?
Well, I think, one thing to think about is, there's the current budget that's proposed starts to defund.
Hold your mic up to your mouth a little. Yeah, there you go.
The current budget that's proposed starts to defund critical research. And if you think about the smartphone in your pocket, if it wasn't for critical government research that was funded by your tax dollars, your smartphone would be a dumb phone. So the internet that goes to your phone, the touchscreen on your phone, Siri, GPS, all was initially funded and supported by the government. And so without those very long-term bets, we wouldn't have them necessarily today. And so we have to think about where we're funding and where we're underfunding. We're also underfunding climate research and the collection of data, which is critically important. And I think something that's important for where the cryptocurrency community can play a role is the notarization of that data, and that data actually existed, because for the first time in more than 20 years, the EPA is taking down climate data that has historically been on there because it's not consistent with the ideology of the current administration. And so if we're pushing out government data, whether it's census data, whether it's climate data, we need to make sure that the fidelity of that data, regardless of administration, Democrat or Republican, is correct. And one way to do that is by notarizing it essentially on a Bitcoin blockchain. So I think that's also incredibly important.
Oh, sorry. Hey, sir, can you either speak up or well, you want to come sit up? You just come sit up here. Have a seat first.
No.
There we go. There we go. There you are. Sir, what's your name?
Which one? How about Emmett?
Hey, how are you?
Aren't we talking about a coordinated, aggressive lobbying effort worldwide? And ultimately, like the tax credits that corporations get for doing a project in a certain community versus another, the communities start bidding against each other for the economic benefit. Isn't that where we need to really focus? Because it is an international play.
I'm not sure I heard the question.
So I think what he was talking about, hey, everybody in the back, love it. Love it. Love the attention y'all are paying to us right now. I think it's very polite. I think y'all are great. Y'all's mama's raised you very well. So we're trying to have a conversation up here. Y'all wanna shut it down for a second so we can finish up? Then y'all can do whatever you want to do.
I don't want to be up here.
All right, there we go. Who wants to actually hear about governance in America? Woo! All right. Who gives a shit about how we actually run the country in the next 2 to 4 years? All right. Can y'all shut up in the back just a little bit for like 10 minutes? Y'all can get drinks later. Y'all can make your ICOs later. We're not pitching anything on stage right now except government. So y'all want to just be a little quiet. All right, that's all I'm saying. All right, thank you. Now, sir, I'm sorry. We had a legitimate conversation going on over here. So you were saying states are privileging different kinds of incentives
Yeah.
for companies, for
Okay.
technology.
Even though lobbying has a bad rap, especially in Washington, D.C., what y'all are really talking about is being able to lobby different countries, if you will, so that they will almost compete for the right to have good, solid, workable regulations that the other countries will then adopt. For instance, Canada right now is looking to adopt.
How do we become a shining light unto the nations from a legal framework around Bitcoin and blockchain? That is the question I think you're asking, sir. Can we be a city on the hill for blockchain regulation that the world can follow? Am I hearing you right?
And shouldn't you fellas be at the point, at the pivot place of actually introducing and maybe funding, if you will, people to go to those nations and sell them on the benefit to them of having the blockchain technology for their financial system. And the ones that adopt it, that's intelligent, that's open, if you will, they then make the other countries jealous enough that they look to adopt something similar that's friendly.
Well, I think you can take that and then I can take a stab at it. But I think there. Well, you go ahead first, and then I'll take a stab. All right. So the question is around regulatory framework and promoting blockchain companies operating in the U.S. to international.
This is strategy rather than technology.
Well, is it? Is it strategy rather than technology? Brian, take point. And sir, thank you. If you wouldn't mind just stepping down so we can get. Yeah, thank you.
Look, I think it's critically important that if the United States wants to continue to maintain its position as leader in innovation across the world, that we update our regulatory policies to allow for things like ICOs. What happens with any emerging technology is that they're not illegal, they're not legal, they're just there. And the entrepreneurs who are building these incredibly powerful companies that will change all of our lives dramatically, that have changed all of our lives dramatically, for the most part do not want to do anything illegal. But they're pushed into a regulatory framework which which doesn't allow for them to do what they want to do. And we have to create, what I would argue, regulatory sandboxes to allow for them to have the on-ramp. And at a certain point, they're going to have to embrace some form of regulation to protect consumers. But ultimately, to get their start, we have to make sure the regulatory burden is very minimal so that they can test out and figure out what makes the most amount of sense and what works and what doesn't work.
What's amazing to me is that the foundation doesn't exist among a lot of American legislators to even have that conversation.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a conversation that most legislators in the U.S. can have. Beyond that, you see in places like China and India and Singapore and various other governments around the world an ability and a willingness to be aggressive about embracing blockchain technology and digital technology in a way that leaves the U.S. sort of as a laggard in these things, which is both shocking and sort of awe-inspiring to see from like the country that is supposed to be one of the foundations of capitalism in the world. Now, beyond that, I wonder if you think that the approach that India, speaking about sort of international frameworks around digital currencies and Bitcoin, whether you think that India's experimentation and embrace of digital currency is in any way illustrative or educational for an American audience. Are there lessons we can learn from that you've seen, or is that not something necessarily that you paid attention to? It's okay if you haven't, you're running for Congress. It's cool.
No, I've actually thought a lot about it, and I think you have to think about what's going on in India and what is their policy goal. Well, their policy goal is financial inclusion, and so digital currencies make a lot of sense when you have a cash-based economy that slows how often the dollar's turning around or the local currency's turning around, and so the same is in Mexico as well. When you're distributing out social welfare and you have to doing it in cash and you can't do it through electronic means, that's also inefficient as well. And so any place where you can, one, increase your efficiency and your transparency in distributing any form of social welfare so that there is less fraud is critically important. But two, if that then gets them into a financial system that they were previously prevented from getting into, and allowing for the informal economy, for them to essentially create a ledger for the informal economy and digitize all of those transactions, then it lets smart startups like yours come in and provide insurance for them, provide credit for them in a more cost-effective way than distributing out a bunch of physical branches. We've heard a lot about mobile money and the success of it in Kenya, but quite frankly, we haven't seen that expanded successfully into many other countries. And I think with this new push, and we've met with, when we were at MIT, we met with the finance minister of Mexico to talk to him about this. They initially viewed Bitcoin as something that was a challenge to their economy. And then after talking with them, they started to realize that, no, this is an opportunity. Look, you can do good things, you can do bad things on the internet. You can do good things and you can do bad things with PayPal or any other platform. You can do good things and you can do bad things with Bitcoin. But ultimately, the good that we'll get from any of these cryptocurrencies will far outweigh any of the negative things that can happen.
Brian, you've been an advocate for Bitcoin as an element or an architect for change in emerging markets for a very long time. Like you've been in emerging markets, operating in emerging markets, seeing how technology can inform emerging markets since Yamada, correct?
Yes.
So, is the government, the U.S. government, doing enough to encourage Bitcoin operators here, blockchain operators here, to play a role in these emerging markets to democratize their currencies? Is that even something that the U.S. should be doing or that U.S. companies should be doing? How can foreign companies play in these emerging markets as like agents of change? Sorry, it might be a little deep for 5:30 in the morning, afternoon.
I think there's tremendous growth opportunities for Bitcoin or cryptocurrency-related companies to grow beyond our borders. I think what the country of Mexico and what India and other countries need are a lot different than what we need here. Here, we can go walk around the corner, pull out $100 out of an ATM. We can go use our credit card at the pizza place down the place. So our need for digital money is compared to what you need in Mexico or India is very different. And so where those applications make sense, and if they also help some of the policy goals of increasing financial inclusion that USAID and the State Department are working on, then yes, I do think they should work with them. But I also think we should help define our own regulation, especially as it relates to, is the cryptocurrency company, are they custodians of the money, of money or not?
Are you going to raise money through an ICO for your own campaign?
An ICO for a campaign. I love it. I love the idea. And how about this? If you have an idea, send it to brian@forde.com. I want to hear your ideas. And here's something even more important that I wanted to announce right here with you guys for the very first time. You can donate to our campaign in Bitcoin. Go to bitcoin.forde.com and you can donate there in Bitcoin. And I promise, I know there's Ethereum fanatics in here, and trust me, I love Ethereum too. And we're going to get to it. We're starting with Bitcoin, and we're going to get to Ethereum soon. So please take a picture, go on there, donate, share it with your friends, and let's show the people in Congress that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies matter.
I feel like we could mic drop on that. You want to mic drop on that?
It.
Let's mic drop on that. Sir, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank y'all for listening.